did you cut your hair?
Okay, there you go.
No, I did not.
No,
Okay.
Rebbe cut his hair. I'm making fun.
Grisha. Grass doesn't grow on busy streets, Grisha.
Uh-oh.
No, I know. Soon, Rebbe, soon.
Don't worry, I got all the lines.
I'm getting there. Don't worry.
God only made a certain amount of perfect heads, the rest he covered with hair.
Well, I'm about halfway
I keep
there.
on going.
Yeah.
Years to train for this. Nothing personal, Mike. Okay, let's see. Did anyone else? We have an iPhone. We have a beautiful glass of wine there. I like that. That looks good. Just a second, everyone.
It's a creep.
All right. L'chaim, everyone. L'chaim, l'chaim.
Man.
Hashem should bless us all with an inspired Shabbos, with inspiration which is greater than we've ever experienced. Okay, I'm going to mute if that's okay. All right. Hashem should bless us all with a blessing. It's so hard for us to generate a deep level of inspiration on our own, especially as we go through life day after day, and we're consumed with all of the different challenges that we have in life, the obligations, the duties, our commitments, all of the wonderful things. So it would be a tremendous blessing to get that inspiration from above. I had a very unique experience this week. I probably had a few, but there's one that comes to mind more than any other. I got a text from someone with a California zip code asking me if I can farbring, that's the Chabad language for, having a nice conversation for 30 to 45 minutes with Rabbi Yitzi Horowitz, who some of you know. Rabbi Yitzi Horowitz is a shliach, a Chabad shliach in California, who has Lou Gehrig's disease, I think, is what it is, right?
ALS.
ALS. Thank you. ALS. Is that the same, or they're two different diseases? Okay, whatever it is.
Yeah, now it's called ALS. Yeah.
What's that?
Now they call it ALS. Yeah.
Oh, they call it ALS. Thank you. Now that you said it, I remember. So he has ALS. I think he's maybe a year or two older than I am, and so we know of each other, and we've spoken when he was well, but we're not really don't know each other very well, and his muscles don't work, so he lays in a bed. His mind is 100% there, and he can communicate with his eyes through a computer. We didn't really communicate in that way, but we just had it on a Google chat where I was able to see him. He was able to see me. There were a few yeshiva students on as well. And number one, it's an unusual experience because you're talking to someone and he can't give me any feedback. I mean, he could through the computer technically, but he's there to listen, but he can't show any facial expressions, and you don't really get any feedback. But yet I know that he's 100% aware of everything I'm saying, and he knows who I am. In fact, the one word he wrote on the computer at the end was Yardley, because he remembers that I'm associated with Yardley, with Rabbi Shem Tov. So it was a really unique experience, and the reason why, and it was very opportune because this Shabbos is a very special Shabbos. It's the Shabbos before Gimel Tammuz, the Rebbe's yahrzeit, which is on Thursday, which everyone should mark down, by the way. I'll send out an email with opportunities for learning. Every one of us should make sure to do some extra study, Torah study, give extra tzedakah, and daven a little bit more on Thursday. It's a very auspicious day as well. And you should write a letter to the Rebbe, to the oil, asking the Rebbe to daven on your behalf for those things that you want, those things that you need, the things that you want. And I'll say, I'm going to throw this in. that you should ask the Rebbe to daven on your behalf for the things that your neshama wants, and that you should ask the Rebbe to make sure that your neshama can shine through despite yourself. And I hope you understand what I mean. I don't mean that offensively. I mean that as much as I mean it for myself. That your neshama should shine through despite yourself, because that is really our innermost meaning. That's really what I want to talk about. When I was, so I had this farbrengen with Yitzi Horitz. I was actually, whenever I teach or I speak, and I'm struggling, and in my mind at least, I'm struggling to connect, I become very burdened. So I begin to work my body. I know this only because of the way my body reacts. That's how I know this. Otherwise I wouldn't know. But my body begins to react, and I begin to sweat, because there's an energy in me that's trying to do something that I feel is not getting done. So for the first few minutes in the farbrengen, I started sweating, and I was realizing what was going on. But then after just a few minutes, it eased off, and it was very fluid and beautiful. It was really beautiful. And the reason why it was it's such an unusual experience. Of course, he's an unusual person, but it's unusual because you're talking to a person who has no facade. His facade is all gone. He is just expressing his neshama. That's really what he's doing. It's really an unbelievable thing. It's very rare to meet a human being where, unfortunately, in his case, he was stripped of his ability to use his body anymore, and he only has the ability to express his soul without the blockages that I just mentioned before of despite ourselves. But the thing is that most people in his situation, as we know, in our challenges, most people, we become a victim of our challenges or of our difficult circumstances. And he could have easily done that, and it would have been understandable and reasonable. But he actually, amazingly, let his neshama shine stronger, I would say stronger than before. Because before he did have his body as an obstacle, as we all do, that's a challenge for all of us to make our bodies more transparent to our neshama. That was taken away from him, but he got a much bigger challenge. And that is this overwhelming despair of the situation he was put in. But he chose to be deliberate and determined to let his neshama shine through. And he does it. He writes an article every single week. He's determined. He's just unbelievably determined that his neshama is who he is. And that's why he's here today. I don't believe he would be living physically if he wasn't really, if he wasn't really living out of his neshama. So it was really, really very powerful. And so out of there are an estimate of 4,900 Chabad families who are shluchim today, who are emissaries throughout the world. He may be, and I shouldn't say he may be, he is one of the most influential shluchim. He is one of the most influential shluchim. And it's because he took the reason why is he took a circumstance which was so overwhelming, but he didn't let that define him. But he said, I'm going to let my neshama shine despite. And the contrast gave him enormous influence because he showed such a high level of genuine commitment to everything that he spoke about until that up to this point in his life. And the contrast brings it out in such an unbelievable way. It touches people very deeply. And so what it inspired in me is that, God forbid, I thought about it. I thought about, before speaking to him, how do I communicate with him? Well, what does he want to hear? What's going to engage him? I just gave thought to these things. But I also thought about, is his situation a blessing? No, it's not a blessing. Gosh, I don't even want to imagine, anyone having to deal with what he's dealing with. It's not a blessing, but he made a blessing of it. So it's not a blessing. but he made a blessing of it. That's what he did. He said, I'm going to turn this into a blessing. This is what I have. I'm going to turn this into a blessing. And in some way, we're blessed. In another way, we're blessed that we have, our bodies are working, our muscles work, we can move around. And our obligation is to make sure that our neshamas shine with our bodies. He has to make sure it shines despite his body. We have to make sure it shines also despite our body, but while our body is working, which is a whole different type of a challenge. And it's a really hard challenge. And that's why I started with it. God should bless all of us with inspiration from above, that we just let our inner desires. Sometimes, I don't know. I wouldn't be. It's not surprising if we never even felt fully our inner desire. And then there were moments maybe that we felt it. All of a sudden, inner yearning, which suddenly, immediately gets quieted by life, reality, practicality, realism, all of the different things that shut down the very deep voice and yearning and desire that's within every single one of us, whether you felt it or not. We all have that yearning. And the ability to give that freedom, that's what freedom really is. That's true freedom. When we can give voice to who we are in our deepest depths. There are so many things going on in the world today. Today, I mean, in the news, there's so many things going on. One of the things, which I think already took a back burner, but one of the things is the search for a vaccine for the virus. And there's a company that's been getting a lot of attention now. It seems like they are the ones who are closest to having a vaccine, which is, I didn't read much about it, but producing some results, Moderna. And they are one of 7 companies that, from the many people who chose to, thank God, pursue a vaccine, it was boiled down to 7. And from the 7, Moderna seems to be leading the pack, strides ahead, which is all great. The United States, our government, invested $500 million into all of these companies, like throwing money at them, just run and get a vaccine as soon as possible to expedite the process. Then it got narrowed down to 7, and now we have 1. This is very interesting because we have a midrash which tells us that the midrash says this. The midrash says if you have 1,000 students of Chumash, right, of the 5 books of Moses, of Chumash, from the 1,000 students, you'll have 100 who will excel in Mishnah. That means that not only will they know the Chumash, but they'll also become excellent students in Mishnah. And then the Medrash says that from the 100 students in Mishnah, you'll have 10 who become expert students in Gemara and Talmud. And from the 10 who are experts in Talmud, you'll have 1 who will become an expert in Amira Hira, someone who's an expert in Jewish law, in actually, deciding and determining Jewish law. So it sounds like when you hear something like this, it sounds like there are 1,000 people. From the 1,000, there's 1 prodigy, and he's going to come out of the pack. He's going to be the prodigy. So the Rebbe makes a point of teaching us that that's not the case. It's not as if there's 1 prodigy in the 1,000. We just need to find out who he is. In order to reach the prodigy, we need to have 1,000 students who are studying Chumash. And we need to have 100 of those who are prodigies in Mishnah, and 10 of those in Talmud. And if we follow that process, eventually all of that whole effort together is going to bring out this individual who is unique, who's most unique. We're all unique, but who's most unique in that he's his expertise in halacha and Jewish law. But if we don't have everyone involved in bringing out their uniqueness of whether it's Chumash, whether it's Mishnah, whether you have a lot of people who are like you, whether you have 1 person like you, another 9 people, another 99 people, it makes no difference. That's all external stuff for credit, for impressions, as long as we feel we need to make impressions or earn votes. But once we get beyond that, which God should bless us that we should be able to get beyond such things, such externalities, it's everyone stepping up to be who Hashem invested in us to be. And then then it's a community of people, and everyone shows up and everyone shines in the way everyone needs to shine. And this is really fascinating, because the Rebbe explains stories in the Torah and in the Talmud in ways that no one ever explained them before. Because he took stories where we see a person who may have done the ugliest thing, and the Rebbe brought out something beautiful that story demonstrates about the person. It's a way of thinking. It's a unique way of thinking. It's a way of thinking that someone thinks when they genuinely, truly, obsessively love every single Jew. And that's just the way they see things. That they see things that no one else sees, because it's just the lens that they wear. And so when the Rebbe speaks about the 12 spies, so we know that this week's Torah portion, Moshe sends 12 spies into Israel because that's what the Jews wanted and Moshe supported. And 10 out of the 12 come back, and they come back with a dismal, we can't conquer the land. Only 2 of them do not have that story, but they are connected with Hashem. And say, what do you mean? God's conquering the land. We're not conquering the land. That's taken care of. Question is strategy. What strategy will you use for God's blessing to flow? They were still connected with that. Who are the 2 people? Yoshua and Kalev. And as I mentioned, for some of you heard on Wednesday night, Yoshua remained connected because Moshe prayed for him before he left. Moshe changed his name from Hosea to Yehoshua, so he had God's name in his name, a Yud and a Hey, which stood for Kayoshiach, that God should save you from the plan of these spies. Kalev didn't have anyone praying for him. He didn't have the blessing from on high. But Kalev had enough self-awareness to realize that he was being sucked into the plan as they were spying. And so what did he do? You know how it is when you're getting drawn into something, you know this isn't good. There's a part of you that wants it, but your essence knows this is not the right thing. You'll enjoy it, but it's the wrong thing to do. All of my buddies are going out to do something, and they're really, really urging me to join them. And they're gonna mock me if I don't. I'll have a whole lot of fun if I go with them, but I know it's really not the right thing. So Kalev runs off to the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, to the cave where our patriarchs and matriarchs and Adam and Eve are buried, to pray to them, to pray to God, to pray also to them, to pray to God on his behalf, which is why we go to the graves of Tzaddikim. And that's the reason why, unfortunately, this year we can't do it, but that's the reason why we always travel to the oil. For the same reason, Kalev went to the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, because this is something that is a part of Jewish tradition, to go to a tzaddik and ask the tzaddik to pray for you. And that's the reason why we write. I'm just addressing some questions that always come up. In the letter that we write to the Rebbe, when we go to the oil, what do we write? There's a classic form of wording that we use to open the letter, and then it's free flowing. And that is, Anna, please, I beseech you, to awaken abundant mercy on my behalf, which is clearly stating that we're asking the Rebbe to pray to God to awaken abundant mercy on our behalf. So that's what Kalev did, and that saved him. That gave him spiritual support, and he didn't end up succumbing to to his buddies, if you will, who are all great men. Before they left, they were all, Rashi says, they were all ksherim hayu. They were kosher. They were tzaddikim. They were righteous people. So the Rebbe says it's not possible that these great people did something and nothing good came out of it. They weren't wicked, evil people. These were leaders. They were good people. They got caught up in something, but actually something good did come out of it. And the good that came out of it, the Rebbe said, is that the fact that in the relationship that Kalev and Yeshua had with them, Kalev and Yeshua became stronger. And in fact, what ends up happening is Yeshua becomes the one to lead the Jews into Israel 40 years later. He succeeds Moshe. Kalev is one of the 2 spies that Yehoshua sends in, which is the Haftorah of the Shabbos, the story. So you should pay attention to the Haftorah. It's a fascinating story, very fascinating story, actually. 2 spies go to the land of Israel for strategy again. And one of them, again, was Kalev. And Yeshua knew Kalev I can trust. He survived the first time around. The second time will be no problem, even though he was already an older man. And the other one who he went with was Pinchas, who we know was a fiery person also. And part of their strength, of Kalev's strength, came from the 10 spies. It came from the friction he had to deal with to develop within himself a strength and connection to Hashem that he otherwise didn't have. It was that he knew he had to run to the cave of Machpelah to daven. And in some roundabout way, the credit in some way goes to the 10 spies. And this teaches us that we, every single one of us, beginning with myself, needs to step up and find the courage to be who God made us to be. I'm going to tell you something that is, it's true. I hope everything I tell you is true. But it's true. It may sound a little bit radical. I don't think it'll sound radical to us. I hope not. And if it does, I'm happy that I am stretching your limits. And it's something every single one of us needs to know. And it's something the Rebbe used to say quite often. A Jew, and let me explain that, because what is a Jew? A divine soul, which is a Jewish soul, a divine soul, that means a soul in this world which is divine. It's not a part of the world. It's something that came from above the world and was put into the world. A divine soul is not controlled by the world. A divine soul controls the world. This is an unbelievably powerful idea. A divine soul is not held to the whims of nature. A divine soul determines how nature will act. And one of the things that the Rebbe used to repeat repeatedly, which he was attempting, and to a large extent successful, but he was dealing with human beings, Jews who are humans, right? Is for every one of us to know that we are divine beings operating in a physical world, and we are here to operate the world. We're not here to be operated by the world. This shift in perspective, which I wish I lived with every day, changes the way we respond to everything going on in our life. The way we see everything going on in life, it changes everything. That's the way the Rebbe saw things, because he was in touch with that consciously. He was transparent to it. That's why he was who he was. That's what made him the Rebbe. But he wasn't satisfied with that, because it's not about him achieving something. It was just the gift Hashem gave him so that he can give it to us. And we have to get out of the way so we can begin to hear that. So I want to say this: this is a very a unique day, the Rebbe's Yahrzeit, and it's a day that we actually prepare for. It's a day that is a significant day. So we think about everything the Rebbe stood for and what he taught us and how he led us and how we can step more deeply into that. So I want to ask all of us, beginning with myself, that over Shabbos, to ask ourselves how we can step more deeply into our being, living out of our divine soul, of being the Jew that freely flows as a Jew in the deep sense of what that means. Hopefully I explained it somewhat. And what is it? And here's the thing to think about. What is one thing? There are probably 100 things, but what is one thing? It could be a mindset, it can be a circumstance, it can be many things, but what is one thing that is holding you back What is one thing that's holding you back from living that? What is one thing that's holding you back from living that? Identify that. Because until we identify what's holding us back, we can't get rid of it. We don't even know what it is. But we have to have the courage to face it and say, I know, I'm going to be honest with myself. I know that I don't want to let go of this in my life, or I'm scared of that in my life, or I'm worried about what's going to happen if. And then we're facing it. Once we face it, we can deal with it. So every single one of us should identify one thing that's holding us back from being who we are. From if you want to experience fulfillment in your life, gosh, I don't even know how to say this. If we maybe we went to school for 8 years and we achieved something, and the feeling of, that graduation, and the feeling of the first day we opened up to express that ability that we now have, right? Like people hang the first dollar behind them, right? And we feel so accomplished. That is nothing. That is nothing like the feeling of a person who liberates themselves to truly be the expression of who we are. So, l'chaim, everyone, that we should have an inspired Shabbos. We should identify at least one thing that's blocking us. We should liberate ourselves so that our neshama can shine. And we speak a whole lot about Mashiach, but this is what Mashiach is. Redemption is this. All of us doing it together. And then Hashem saying, I'll do the rest. L'chaim. I'm going to mute. And everyone feel free to throw out your comments, objections, protests.
Rabbi. Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. It was very inspiring.
Thank you.
Did you get my text?
Can I tell you what the Rebbe would say?
What?
And I'm not the Rebbe, so I'm just mimicking the Rebbe. I'm acting like a big shot now, okay? The Rebbe would say,